What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. Cool. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. Today, I have a serial entrepreneur on the podcast that has done an enormous amount of work across many different genres. JP O'Brien is the founder and CEO of Biosciences. It's a precision nutrition company that works with AI, which is really interesting, and I can't wait to learn about it. They have people do lab work, and they use AI to help them sort of make their lives more efficient and optimized via a health chain, which is pretty damn cool. Co-founder of Black Lab as well, which is it's a venture ecosystem. You've done so much, JP, and I'm sure your stories are incredible. Now you're really focused on optimization, health optimization, with Biosciences. So I would love to just give you a quick rundown about what we do here at the Born and Made podcast. But essentially, I am really interested in the nature-nurture question, whether people are born with an inherent skill set to do what they do and have the drive that they have, or if for something along the way motivated them to get to where they are today. So were you born or were you made? And I ask that question to every guest at the end of the podcast, but the way I like to get there is through hearing your story. And I know you've got a bunch of them. So I would like to sort of go way back to when you were, a kid and talk about what it was like growing up as JP, and try to figure out if there was things along the way that you just did naturally, or potentially a parent, a mentor, a coach, whatever, sort of convinced you that you were the right person for the job.
Mike, thanks for having me. I mean, I think it's an amazing conversation, and I'm probably already opinionated, but I'm hopefully maybe even during this conversation, I'll change my mind a little bit by the end. I was actually born as Jean-Paul, right? So we start that way. I was born in Versailles near Paris, France. My dad worked for IBM. So back then that stood for I've been moved. And it was the closest thing to being an army kid. Growing up was fascinating because we went basically between kind of Paris and back to the kind of tri-state area, Connecticut, New York area. And, the most interesting difference then I went to high school in Connecticut. So the most interesting I found difference between me and some of the kids I went to high school with, frankly, was the exposure I had to all these amazing cultures. I mean, our vacations, instead of like ride playland, right, we're going to, Greece or Egypt. And it wasn't because of opulence. It was simply because that's what you get on a bus and do that, right? Like the culture difference between Europe and the US was so different growing up that you could see as being like kind of perceptive human, you could be like, wow, this is massively different, even though us as humans aren't that different. How we think, how we approach, how we communicate, even how we kind of interact, very, very different. So that was kind of an early, for me, an early time in my life when I got to see how environment was very, very different and made an impact on me.
Do you think that, so, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I've actually asked myself that question too, because I've traveled to Europe a lot as well. My wife is Danish, and so I spent a fair amount of time in Northern Europe, but we've traveled all over Europe together, my wife and I feel like there is, the sort of theory I've developed is that the cultures are just much older than the United States. They're, when I say rich, I mean, they've been doing the same thing for, thousands of years, as opposed to the United States, which is, we're kind of babies in the grand scheme of things. Not saying that there's a whole bunch of other elements that's sort of like hamburgers and hot dogs and the internet
Right.
that keeps the United States in a tight spot. But I agree with you. I feel like culture is such a huge part of the development of one's mind. Do you think that was something that actually helped shape who you are today? Were you aware? Were you aware of that at a young age?
No, I mean, truth be told, not knowing difference, when I was, 12 in Paris, I was smoking. I was drinking beer after school. Came back to the US, and the first thing I asked my friends or new friends were like, hey, where can you buy cigarettes? And everyone looked at me like I was crazy. So yeah, I kind of saw some of those things. I didn't know the impact it would have on me later. And those were kind of cultural, societal norms that, kids would go through at different ages. And then, everyone's turning 16 in Connecticut and getting bombed off their mind. Meanwhile, I'm like, what's the point, right? And so you can kind of see these kind of different developmental times. When I probably most realized it was actually in college. Played a couple sports in college and then realized that my body wasn't handling that very well. So I stopped. I was playing football and lacrosse, stopped that, and then I joined basically a race car team, and we were building electric hybrid race cars back in kind of the early 90s. So super new, from a kind of try to take to market type of idea. And what we built was I actually ran the team, and we ended up building a cross-discipline group of about 60, not just engineers, but artists and finance majors, business majors, all come together as a team. We'd build this car literally from scratch. We'd weld everything and manufacture everything, come up with all the designs ourselves. But bringing those different ideas and perspectives together, I think that was actually born out of my youth, seeing all those different perspectives coming together, and then being able to manage that in a really powerful way to be able to kind of do projects. So I think that's when I really first realized that that had a tremendous impact on me.
How old were you
in college?
When you were doing the electric race car stuff?
I guess I was like 19, 20.
That's interesting. Can you recall the first time you actually tried to really do something, sell something, make something? Can you recall?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was just trying to let things go back further and further. For sure, in college, that was a time when we were doing things that nobody gave us the script for, right? So the car team is a perfect example. We'd go out and we'd call, manufacturers and just literally ask them for money and all their stuff for free. And, nobody gave us the script to go sell or ask those questions to people who had, no reason to do that. In high school, I guess if you go back a little bit, there was always kind of a service component to me. I really am we'll talk about this probably later, but I've realized now my purpose in life is what I call to unleash the greatness of people around me. And back then, the way that showed up was everything I was doing, whether I was a caddy on a golf course, was just about making that the people I was interacting with just awesome. So even if I was caddying for a guy who was shooting 110, I would have an extra ball in my pocket, and it might just show up in the rough versus out of bounds. So that's the sort of stuff that I thought was is different, right? Because nobody was giving me the script of hey, this is the way to do it.
I just find it so interesting that a lot of entrepreneurs tend to have a make other people happy gene. I similarly have a very similar outlook, right? My purpose is quite frankly, to make others happy. I mean, I believe that my purpose in life and my service in life is I get an enormous amount of joy from watching other people thrive and to make other people happy around me. And so I've
When did you
always
when did you discover that purpose for yourself?
really early on, I mean, I was always for whatever reason, I always I was never the best at anything, but I always had the most heart for the most part. And because I had the most heart, I felt an obligation to bring up other people around me, because I knew that like I was getting knocked down, and the best way for me to get back up was to ask for help. And so when I would ask somebody for help that wasn't at the level that I was, it made them feel really good. And I kind of learned that as a kid, that I had an ability to make other people happy in it, and it really made me feel good. And that's sort of how I traveled through life. And I also think that when I started working in restaurants when I was very young, I started working in restaurants when I was like 12 or 13 years old. For whatever reason, I wasn't a good listener in school at all. I was not a good listener to my parents at all. Like, not like authority didn't really stand well with me. However, when I was in a working environment, I was able to listen to the customers and the guests. Like I was able to like tune in hardcore and listen and like actually like think about it and think about what it is they wanted. How can I make this experience better for them? Even as a busboy, it was like I was very aware of it. And so, that is ultimately what's given me this sort of realization that like my why is to make others happy, to really be of service. Mm-hmm. But I find it so interesting when I get a chance to talk to people like you. You said you joined a car club, and then you very quickly brushed over the fact that you led the car club. And you were managing like 60 people, and that's not typical, right? It's just not. That there's a certain kind of person that has the ability to sort of find themselves in those situations by their general nature. Do you remember when you were doing that car club, like how you ended up leading it, or why you ended up leading it? Did people just like for whatever reason just look to you as the one that was going to run the show?
Yeah, if I look back, I mean, even in sports, I came to the US in 8th grade, so I didn't play football and lacrosse. Those were new sports to me. Got in just learning the sport. Next thing you know, a couple years later, I'm the captain of the teams. And I'm not saying like this, it's just tying back into your point there, right? Which is, those weren't things necessarily I stood up and said, I want to be the captain. It's just that your team and your coaches and the people around you say, hey, your work ethic, the way you inspire people, the way you speak into people, or not even speak, but like be around people, they recognize that, and they want to highlight that. So I think that's probably, and then at Cornell, when I was there, freshman year of football, I'm a 6'1" at the time. I was 220-pound center. So I was the smallest guy on the line. My quarterback was taller than me, and everyone else is 6'7" and 300. And so I wasn't even starting when we first got there. And then by the third game, I was starting and I was the captain, right? So I think it's a how you show up, and when the people see that, they want to be around that, and I think that's a natural thing around us.
Two questions for that, because I think that's also really interesting. When you say how you show up, how do you show up?
Well, I'm different now than I was then. I'm much more purposeful, and I've done a lot of consciousness work and stuff over the past 8 years. So that's a fascinating topic. And now I show up as space for you, and we can talk about that. It's actually
show up as what? Say that again. I missed that.
As space for you. Got it. It's actually, I'm stealing it from a philosopher teacher, Richard Lang, who talks about the headless way. And so it's just this non-dual kind of concept, and how we show up for people. Anyway, that's a whole, it might be another whole nother series we can talk about, but I'm happy to dive in there too. Back in the day, I think I showed up as really motivated and super achiever, and knowing that I was in some way in control of my emotions if I had that point of view. I talk about it this way, actually. This is maybe a better way to talk about it. I kind of was really good at playing the choose your own adventure game, right? It was like a book was put in front of us. Like I didn't get to pick where I was born or what my name was or my parents or my brothers and sisters, right? I didn't really pick my high school even. I don't think I really even picked my college, right? I mean, I applied to a few, but did I really research all the colleges in the world, or was it just a thing to do, right? And I picked one, and the sports I played, even my wife. I met my wife freshman year in college. Did I really pick her? I mean, I met her at the bar. We liked each other. We started dating. Like I didn't really pick her, right? I didn't choose it. And I was playing that game, but I felt like I think I was pretty good at it, because then I started a company, then I sold the company, started another company, right? And so I kept on playing this game. It wasn't until about 8 years ago when I took a step back and realized that, I don't have to read someone else's choose your own adventure book, that we can put that one down and kind of create our own. And so showing up back then was about trying to be the best at picking, what was in front of me. And today it's a little different.
Do you remember having a feeling in those days that you had to be the captain? Was there something that like, did you like wake up in the morning and say like, my goal is to be the captain of this team? Or was it just like what you did?
Yeah, I see where you're getting there. It was just what I did. I mean, I wanted to be, I wanted to run the car team. That was not like, I wasn't anti that, but it wasn't also like, that's what I had to do. It's just that that's what happened.
I have a feeling I know who you are in terms of the born or made world. So you're running the car team, and then what? You're done with college.
Done with college. Graduated as an aerospace mechanical engineer. So I have this like systems mind, right? I see things as, nothing's created or destroyed out inside the system, right? And so that's how I see the world on everything. Did a little stint as a design engineer for Emerson Power, realized that industry is moving way too slow. Ended up joining Anderson Consulting, which back then was, one of the top 5 consulting companies as a technologist, software developer. And became an architect on some massive, very, very quickly, right time, place, mid 90s, the internet was becoming commercial, built systems for like JP Morgan, their global cash management system which was doing $1 billion of transactions a day. It's really scary that they had kids like us writing that software, frankly. But again, found myself in these really interesting roles where nobody, like we were just the right age, because we had learned distributed computing and object orientation much differently than everyone else had been developing. So here comes these young, just out of college technologists, and we can build distributed computing like no one else can. So we're doing that, realized that we were onto something as individuals, as humans. And so 4 of us leave Anderson to start a company called Learning Production. So that was my first company, started that in 98. I was the CTO and co-founder. And it was basically, we were doing online games for companies with large sales forces or service forces. So you would learn by doing, right? It was like before ed tech existed, it was like the first kind of real ed tech type of concept with virtual learning. Sold that in 2000. And then that was kind of my first foray into entrepreneurship, and caught the bug.
How many businesses have you founded or co-founded throughout your career?
Probably around 10 or 11 at this point.
And did you have exits from all of them?
No, like one of them was my brother, who's also a musician. We were living up in the mountains of Colorado here, but in Netherlands, and he's like, we should start a coffee shop. I'm like, I don't even drink coffee at that time. But anyway, so we started this coffee shop called Acoustic Cafe, and every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we'd have live music, and maximum size was 40 people, and Sunday was jam band, and it was awesome. I ended up having my two kids during that time period. So I have pictures of me holding my baby daughter while there's like Martin Dove from Santana playing on the stage. Well, that company failed, right? Like there was no eggs out of that. That was a $40,000 investment into experience, but yeah. So not all of them have been successful, but they've always all been tremendous learning opportunities.
We're taught, traditionally, we're taught to find something that you're good at and put all your eggs in that basket and double down on it and do one thing and do it really, really well. But I find a common thread amongst entrepreneurs such as yourself to create. Now, the interesting thing about you, which is pretty rare, I would say, is that most of the time, an successful individual is either a creative or logistical thinker. It sounds to me like you're a double threat. You have this sort of logical way of thinking about things and systems, but you're also incredibly creative. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I actually think the creative process is a system that can be taught. And I don't know why it's not taught more. At Black Lab here, when we started this 8 years ago, it was to almost recreate the car team. We wanted people from all different disciplines to come together. We want to have a single a unifying purpose, or the infinite game from Simon Sinek, right? Like what is our infinite game? And that for us is to help propel humanity forward. But so besides that, like you could do anything under that umbrella, right? I mean, DraftKings probably doesn't fit into that, right? But you can be an artist, you can be a scientist, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a marketer. There's so many things that will help propel humanity forward in a really beneficial way for if you start thinking about truly what's in the best interest of humanity. And so that's the catalyst, I guess, that kind of sets everybody in motion to work together. But that creative place, so inside our place, we actually have artists. Like this is actually a Will Day piece, Will Day art, and he's actually in our environment, actually in our location here. And his studio is beautiful, art everywhere. But that's what we want to do, is we want to kind of mash and mesh people together so that even the most logistical, ops person can understand what it means to be creative and leverage that creative opportunity within them.
I love that piece of art. You got to hook me up with that guy. It's awesome. Do you think that, so the creative process is a system and it should be taught, and you don't know why it's not taught? Walk us through what that looks like the creative process for you systemized.
Yeah, so just some backstory on this. So when I was starting this, what happened beforehand is kind of life gave me this opportunity. I'm using air quotes for those who can't hear me, see it. Life gave me this opportunity to kind of take a step back and figure out what was going to be part two in my life. And I really started to take inventory of what I was doing. And like I was saying, as I was kind of reading, what I realized now is I was always looking for the opportunities of which one I want to take. So I was good at this choose an adventure book, right? Like you want to marry the maiden, go to page 42. You want to slay the dragon, go to page 80, right? And so, so I put that book down and I was like, okay, what is this? And so I started reading about all the greats, Aristotle to Da Vinci, to Mozart, to Einstein, to Feynman, and to even the most recent guys and gals. And they had a couple of things in common, right? One was that they all had tremendous understanding about personal purpose in life, and that North Star, if you know what that is, that's the thing. And the work to be aligned with that, it almost is irrelevant. Like Viktor Frankl would say, right? Like the circumstance doesn't matter. It's what you do with that circumstance and what your purpose is. The Viktor Frankl story of being in concentration camp and surviving through that. So when you think about that, all those people had it, and a lot of times that purpose wasn't even societally like like appropriate or friendly at the time, right? Because they were kind of these change makers. The second thing they had is they understood the system of turning thoughts into reality, of actually the amazing thing that humans can do, which is we can evolve by having creativity and coming up with a new idea. So where did that new idea come from? Did it come from like the burrito that I ate this morning? Come from like God or the universe or just randomness firings in my synapses, right? Like where did it come from? But that's an amazing thing to come up with a brand new idea. I mean, if we look around us, you know, everything around us was created by somebody who came up with an idea. And then the process they understood was turning that idea into reality. That's a system. And so artists, you know, what they're actually doing is they're not being technical with like, okay, I'm going to make this stroke here and there. They're actually trying to take energy and throw it onto the canvas, right? And they're actually like turning some kind of energy and what's that motion feel like and look like on there. I think we can do the same thing in every aspect. For an athlete, like what's my thought? I want to jump higher. I want to run faster. If I'm a business, if I'm an entrepreneur, I need to hit the market. What's my customer going to want? What do they want? Right. But if you have that system, then I think that's what I mean by a system around creativity.
It's so funny that you say the system around creativity, because I never really thought about it as a system necessarily. I've founded, you know, I'm the founder of a few different companies as well, and I've always had a pretty linear process of how I get from my initial thought to like reality. And that process is always sort of followed a steps of service, for instance. You know, it's always sort of been this, and I've never really shared about it, but it's that you really made me think that you know, creatives tend to be, and for some artists specifically, it could look really crazy, right? It could look really, someone would potentially say that's not, you know, that's not acceptable in some ways. But do you have like when you come up with an idea, and I think this could be super valuable for everyone listening, do you have a system or program that you follow, or you just tend to intuitively follow to take it from thought to reality?
Well, so one of the systems we created or one of the kind of the models, frameworks we created here to help entrepreneurs think through this stuff is, you know, it's just thinking about it this way, right? Which is, if you have your purpose aligned and you have your values, so do your purpose work, do your values work, then every single input that comes in, right, is just a signal, right? What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, our emotions, maybe the sixth sense, again, is that God or the universe, even our internal thoughts, right? So all these things are coming into us. And then it's like, if you think about it, we are a system. So we're just, I mean, in one sense, we're a robot, right? We're pre-programmed to react. Signal comes in, we are pre-programmed to react. We almost have no free choice in that small time frame. And then as we start to act and react to that signal, if we get really good at increasing the space and kind of consciousness around what's coming in at us, then we can decide how to act based on that signal. I know this sounds very engineering-ish, but hopefully you're tracking with me.
I am. You're talking, I mean, from what I'm hearing, you're just talking about the amount of ability, or the ability that one has to let a thought manifest before a reaction, potentially.
Yeah, because this signal's coming in. Yeah, exactly. So the signal's coming in, for example, you know, some signals are good to know, like, you know, the saber-toothed tiger's coming after me, run, right? Like that's a signal. That's things I survived because I know that. Another signal is like, you know, my wife pushes my button in a really bad way, right? Like she does something, or I'm driving down the street and the guy slams on his brake for no reason. Like I could react instantaneously for that. But and a lot of people will talk about consciousness or mindfulness here, which is if you open the space between that signal coming in and your reaction, then the habit becomes about always making all your actions focused on propelling you closer to your purpose and your definite plan. Then you don't waste any time in the downward cycle of, you know, envy and fear and greed and wrath and all these sort of other, how it looks, right? So if you're trying to go after something, like you're trying to build a beautiful picture or build a company, and you have this thought like, hey, we're going to go do this. So now all of a sudden, all this other stuff that's coming in, they're just signals. And how are you going to respond to each of those signals? That's the behavior and the system that we can start to get involved with.
How would you advise or guide someone who is either young or old, but struggling to understand purpose or their specific purpose?
Yeah, so we even have, we do that all the time. First of all, I have two kids, 18 and 20 now, or just about. Their birthdays are in a week or so, and they've heard this from me since they were 12. And when they were young, they would roll their eyes, like, "God, Dad, whatever." But now they're at this point where they've identified for themselves. I mean, I wish I knew this when I was 12 and 18, by the way. And they're living amazingly purposeful lives. Doesn't mean everything's beautiful, right? Doesn't mean they don't run into problems. But when they run into those problems, again, all those are just signals. They're just circumstances that come at you, and you're like, okay, cool, I can deal with that, right? So you're not letting those circumstances modify how you show up in the world, right? I tell everybody, if they don't have a purpose, is that I'm going to give you one, which is your purpose is to find your purpose. Like, be a super seeker. Be so curious. Every time you open a door, look around and be like, what is it? Is it that? When you meet somebody new, Mike, is he going to tell me something that I need to know? And so be that seeker for that. And then it took me like 8 months to really articulate mine. But when you find it, you'll know it. And then that's like, every day you wake up, you're just like, game on.
And so currently, or maybe not currently, maybe, eternally, your purpose is to be space for others.
Well, that's how I show up. My purpose, the words I use that really motivate me, is to unleash the greatness in the people around me. And that has a lot to do with purpose. But that's why when I figured that out, I was like, what am I going to do with that? And that's where Black Lab came up, which is like, hey, let's build this ecosystem and this vehicle basically for change makers, thinker doers, people as crazy as I am, a safe place to come in and innovate and create and turn thoughts into reality. And so we launched that. It's a part venture fund. It's a part human performance lab. It's part, high-tech incubator space. And we bring all sorts of people together, whether it's DoD, special forces folks, to artists, to shamans, to scientists. And we purposely collide these people. And then magically, I guess, meaningful relationships are built, a la Ray Dalio, and meaningful work. And so next, we're working on projects. And actually, that's where Biosciences came out of, was a collaboration between a bunch of other folks coming together around human performance.
Let's talk about Biosciences.
Sure.
Give us the scoop. Let us know what it actually is and how it functions, and ultimately what the purpose of that company is.
Yeah, so it's a great example of a case study that kind of came out of Black Lab. And so if our hypothesis was, we bring amazing people together and we talk about the hardest problems that humanity is facing, and we bring people together that are purpose-led and want to work together in the spirit of give first. That's like the space that could create amazing companies that anyone would want to invest in. So the personal story was 3 years ago, I found this bump on my hip, and like maybe most people would, or guys anyway, I'm in the shower trying to pop it. As thing is it. And I go to my doctor and he's getting my checkup. I'm like, hey, can you get rid of this thing? And of course he's trying to pop it. He thinks it's it too. He's like, yeah, just go to the dermatologist. It's in a bad spot on your hip. So luckily I make an appointment. I go there, get it cut out. He doesn't think it's anything important. It's in the sweat gland. And then he calls me up 2 weeks later. This is like right before, this is like early December. And he's like, you got to come back in. That was hydrodenocarcinoma. And we didn't get clear margins, which is doctor speak for it's cancer, and we may have left some in there. So goes back in, cuts out a bigger section to make sure he got all the tumor. This time he did. So luckily we had clean margins that time. And but that sent me down this cancer path. And now if you search for hydrodenocarcinoma, you'll find out that 70% of people die within 3 years. It's a really, really rare cancer, subcutaneous, but in the kind of melanoma family, so skin kind of cancer type of family. Because it's so rare, they haven't done a ton of research on it, right? Unlike breast cancer and leukemia and other types of cancers, they haven't done a ton of research on it. So there's really no known, treatments for it. And the reason people die because it looks like it's it. And a lot of times people get on their neck or whatever, and next thing you know, they just don't do anything. I got lucky, I did it, but then it would metastasize, it goes to your brain, it goes to your liver, and you're dead. So I just got really lucky, timing wise, I got super lucky. But it sent me down this really curious path, frankly, of why do I have this thing? Like, I know it seems like an obvious question now, but back then I never thought about like, am I going to get cancer? Why would I get cancer? And what would set me up to get cancer? So I'm down in Anschutz, which is the big medical facility here in Colorado, kind of the top of the line, kind of a Mayo Clinic type of facility. And I'm with Dr. Robinson, he's the director of the oncology melanoma. And he's like, yeah, so we got chemo, we got radiation, we can cut out more, we can go down your groin and get all your lymph nodes out. And I'm like, wait. Well, why? If you don't know anything about this cancer, why would you do any of those things? And he's like, well, that's kind of like our best we know right now. So I said, well, let's ask you a different question, which is, why is it there? And he's like, well, we don't know that answer. He's like, he started going to the technical side or the biology side of, you damaged it when you were a kid, maybe playing football. That DNA now, from some reason, is flagging and it's starting to grow. He's like, okay, well, there's a good question. Why is it flagging now? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, how is it growing? He said, well, you're feeding it somehow. I was like, well, let's stop feeding it. How do we do that? Right. So these are kind of like first principles thinking. So this goes back to like how we, think about entrepreneurs and how we think. But what happened was, he's like, well, it's probably what you're eating. And I'm like, well, let's start there. I can affect what I'm eating. So I do my blood, I get my DNA, get all my biomarkers, find out that for whatever reason at 45, simple carbs are spiking my glucose. And so my blood sugar, literally with like eating a piece of bread, remember I was born in France, and so baguette and cheese is like top of my diet, is basically like poison for me now. And so I went down this whole research side, ended up jumping on something called the plant paradox diet, which was fascinating. Basically it's a diet to really make sure your blood doesn't pop after you eat. So how do you make, yeah, exactly, right? And again, it got me so curious. I had no idea, but it makes so much sense that what you eat is like the number one impact on your body, but yet like nobody says that. Big food doesn't say that, big pharma doesn't say that, your doctor doesn't even say that, right? What do they say? Is like, make sure you eat and exercise. So anyway, went down this path, got healthy, lost 40 pounds, cancer-free, never did any other treatments, feel super blessed and happy. But what came out of that was like this new knowledge that, holy cow, we can have tremendous impact on the human just by what we're eating. So like, let's flip the switch. So at one of our summits at Black Lab, Human Performance Summit, this conversation came up, and we just asked this, a bunch of DoD folks, the military folks, and other folks in attendance, pro athletes, hey, does nutrition matter and how do you deal with it? And they're like, 100% it matters, but yeah, we have nothing. Like, we can go to GNC and buy some supplements, but that's it. So MeBios basically came out of that concept, which was, let's go after building a precision nutrition company using true science to figure out, from a diagnostic perspective, what you need individually. I'll give you another example. My son, of course, now I did have my whole family take all these tests. My son has something called MTHFR. Are you familiar?
No.
It's a basically a genetic defect where he has two SNPs that therefore his body won't methylate vitamin D, iron, and B. Those are really important molecules for the human to survive.
So even if he ingests like D3, for instance, his body will not metabolize that the way it's supposed to.
He has to ingest pre-methylated vitamin D. Right. So methylation is a process the body uses, like a system, right? Usually it's through sun. Hey, I'm going to take that sun, I'm going to methylate it, and I'm going to turn it into something we can use. He can't do that naturally. So the only way for him to get vitamin D is to have premethylated vitamin D. Now, it's super inexpensive. But if he didn't do this, what I found out is that he would have chronic fatigue and probably heart failure at like late 20s, like 28. And it blows my mind that not every single person right now is not taking a 23andMe test and checking to see if they have the MTHFR, SNPs. Like, it blows me. Like, the technology is here to do it, and yet no one's saying, hey, here's how to, here's a look at it. That's one example of the things now that technology and diagnostics can do. My son now takes something like, 15 cents of vitamin D every morning, and he'll be fine for his life.
You bring up something that's pretty close to my life story with my son. I have a 3-year-old wonderful son who was showing weird signs of he wasn't hitting his milestones, and we noticed some muscle atrophy very young and low muscle tone, and his eyes weren't moving. When he turned his head, his eyes would sort of slowly follow. And I knew that there was something wrong early on, 3 months or so. And our pediatrician said, oh, don't worry, some people develop slower than others. And I said, because he cognitively was fine, but physically was not. I knew it. And after 3 months of listening to them, I said, I need to see a specialist, like stat. I want to see a specialist. So they sent us to an optometrist. Optometrist sent us, said, I'm not sure exactly what this is because I noticed it mostly in his eyes. I want to send you to a pediatric neurologist. And so we went to the neurologist, and neurologist said, I want to do an exome on the whole family. So my wife, myself, and my son all did this super intense full gene study. Now, the downside with genes is that they're only like the studies on genes are relatively new, right? There's 20,000 gene sequences, and they only know what something like 5,000 of them do for us. And so there's lots of work to be done in genetic studies in general, but they flagged 2 mutated genes in his sequences. And one of them was the SUFU gene, and the SUFU gene draws a direct line to muscle development. And so they actually still don't know how to diagnose him. But the scariest news I've ever gotten in my life was when my son was 7 months old. They told us that they didn't know if he was ever going to walk. And so my wife and I were both like, oh my God, like, this is real. This is a moment in life where I will never forget sitting in that doctor's office with the genealogist, or I think I forgot what the name of the doctor specifically was, but the neurologist and the gene doctor. And thank God my son is running, and he's a little off balance at times, but he's jumping and he's running, and he's going to be okay. But there's so much work to be done in the world that you're broaching. Looking at, they asked me specifically if I wanted to know if I was prone to specific cancers, by looking at my genes. And I said, sort of, cautiously optimistic, yes. And my wife said, no, I don't want to know. But the crazy thing is that, like, now that we know one thing, that this SUFU gene mutation is so rare, there's only been 12 recorded studies of this specific gene and the mutation that he has, that came down through my wife, because my wife also has it. And they basically said that a small percentage of those 12 people, I think 2 of them have, in children, have developed a form of brain cancer. And so that brain cancer only affects children 8 years old and younger. So every 6 months, we have to take Dakota to go get a brain scan. But had we not known that, And had the technology not been there to check that out, God forbid, let's just say nothing's going to happen. I mean, he's fine, but it's scary. So I agree with you that there's so much we can do. I think the hard part is the accessibility, right? And so you're trying to create something that is going to make this accessible for many more people.
Yeah. You just what you said there really brought up to me. So great to hear your son's doing well and jumping around. I think there's just recently, epigenetics is a word that's being used a lot now, more commonly in a lot of the literature, and the idea of that you have a blueprint of what's possible, this probability map of expression. And then it's whether or not those genes are actually expressed, whether turned on, that is going to give you the higher probability of like a cancer. And the latest studies show that over 90% of all these diseases are based on environmental factors. So it's not based on you may have the gene that might make it possible, but it gets expressed by some kind of trigger, like my hip cancer, right? Which was what I was eating or what I was doing, right? So it's environmental factors like, sun, or mostly your food and your sleep, and a lot of what you put in your head, right, consciously. And we're looking at this from how do you reverse some of those as well. So if you're expressed right now, if your genes are expressed, how do you put yourself into, like for my case, I put myself into ketosis. It started to change the way my body was thinking about, basically using its food and how it store and how it, try to eat all my fat, and they're also kind of, reduce my inflammation. But there's ways of kind of looking at these things, and to your point, super early on. But if we can get better at reversing those expressions for people and in a more natural way, and immunotherapy is doing this in cancers and things already, that's a really exciting area. So yeah, it's a fascinating area. That the time to be in this area right now is amazing.
So what is the process for MeBios? What is like, if a guy like me wants to get checked out, how does it work?
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of the insight of, because from an entrepreneurial perspective, what we're doing, but we have two sides. We're working with the DoD. Actually, we have a grant with, not grant, it's a contract with the Air Force and Air Force Research Laboratory. And with them, what we're doing basically is we've taken the 260 million scientific literature articles out there. We've brought them into our servers, and we're using AI, a tool called NLP, which is natural language processing, to take those articles and to basically understand what they say. That's kind of super at the cutting edge of what AI can do right now. We could do that with songs and fiction and literature, but scientific literature, for whatever reason, we don't write very well so that AI can understand. So with that, then we're creating, basically, imagine your own personalized, artificial or augmented nutrition scientist, right? So you could type in and say, hey, I'm feeling tired, what should I do? And if you gave it more and more of your information, it would look at all the studies and be able to provide you basically all the knowledge, as if some doctor read all of those, 5,000 articles new a day, every day. That's impossible from a human. So we're trying to provide that from an augmented AI perspective. That's going to be really helpful for whether it's military or me and you, to be able to kind of get an understanding, what does the science say today to do based on my situation and my goals. So that's the back end of what we're doing. On the front end of that, we have a couple tools. Like for one, our most popular is just basically the precision nutrition program. We get your biomarkers. We ask you to take a 23andMe test too, to make sure you don't have the top 5 kind of genes like the MTHFR type stuff that we can't, pinpoint today. Based on that, in a conversation with you, based on your goals and where you want to be, we basically customize monthly supplements for you. I'd rather that everyone eat all their nutrition, but like my son and like me, we can't, right? I don't want to have 3 servings of chicken liver to get my niacin every day. like I'm not going to do that, right? So what are the things that I can eat, and what are the things that I need to supplement in order to maximize optimal? So that's what we do. And it's amazing. We've got people from special forces. We got people from first responders. We got artists. We got athletes, my kids. My son now is just got into UPenn. He's going to be quarterback there in 22. My daughter's a big time climber. So it's kind of like, again, part of this is you can see this purpose aligning. Hey, what do you want to do? Where are you? And then how do we make sure this body is optimal to be able to live and kind of go and do that?
Wow. That is just absolutely remarkable, man. I can't wait to participate. Honestly, I am always looking to optimize, and I just actually recently got a full set of labs, and I was pleasantly surprised. My doctor, the doctor who I was working with to review the labs, told me that I was one of the healthiest guys he's seen in 35 years, outside of,
Awesome.
which was shocking to me, my testosterone levels. My testosterone levels are low. My free test is like, he was like, it's like very low for my age. And so, I don't know how I necessarily tackle that without supplementing with testosterone. But I'm a natural bodybuilder. So for me, that's sort of out of the cards right now. But I'm sure there's things you could probably tell me a long list of things that I can do to help potentially boost my test levels. But we'll save that for another time. I just want to just talk about a few more things before we go. You said you met your wife as a freshman in college, so I would imagine that you guys have been together for a couple of years. Relationships, in my opinion, the business of business is relationships when it comes to business, and I believe that happiness in life is a direct correlation to the relationships you have. And so I really believe in relationships. And I mean, I think the longest standing human study in America anyway, but potentially globally, is this Harvard study where they took 300 or 700 men. 300 of them were sophomores in Harvard, and 300 of them were the toughest kids from the streets of South Boston at the time in 1938. And they started surveying them, and the survey is still going. But the findings currently are that the ones that were most successful, and that doesn't mean financially, that just means that have lived the most fruitful, happy lives, had successful relationships, personal relationships. It didn't matter what they did in business. It didn't matter, how fit they were. The happiest men out of that survey for the last, whatever it's been, 80 years, is their ability to develop and nurture relationships with others. And so I just want to ask you some advice on relationships and what's given you the ability to have a successful relationship for a number of years with your wife.
Man, I love this topic. Well, first of all, I mentioned Ray Dalio before, in his book Principles, and he talks about, Ray was the founder of Bridgewater, one of the largest, most successful private equity firms, period. And now he's kind of, his second or third part of his life has been about kind of sharing some of his what made him successful. He'd be a great interview if you try to get him on this. He'd be, I mean, you might want to set 3 hours for that him, but he talks about that as well. Like the most important things in life are, one, meaningful relationships, and two, meaningful work with those people. And I 100% subscribe to that. When I look at my wife and I, Jennifer, she's, we admit, like, we're totally different people. Like, compared to freshman year in college, totally different people. I mean, I basically totally changed like my mindset around everything since then. And she has as well. And so I think part of it is just remembering when you wake up, you're in a house with somebody you love, but it could be a totally different person. So like, be curious about that person and like, what is it that how they're shifting and changing. Don't put them into a box like they're going to stay there. I think the parents have the same issue with their kids as they're growing up, right? Like, I just wanted to stay, at 12 because they were cute. What is this 16 thing? And so to me, I think relationships, if we really have this agape love for somebody and saying, hey, I want to unleash you and I want you to be awesome and happy, part of that's just curiosity, right? Of like what their perspective, and I think that's what builds a strong relationship.
You've said curiosity a few times, and I kind of think the topic, or the sort of the purpose of this podcast, for all of you guys listening, is success is in curiosity. Success is in the discovery, the journey, lifting up as many rocks as you can, and actually like yearning discovery and curiosity in yourself and in others. Habits mean everything to me in my life. Habits almost broke me completely and destroyed my life. And I was able to luckily turn that around and make habits the cornerstone and pinnacle of what makes my days a success today, for the most part. Are there any habits that you do on a consistent basis that you can share with us?
You know, until about, like I keep on talking about this 8 years ago, but I never meditated. And then my brother, the musician, was also a shaman. He teaches in the Lakota tradition. And so finally I went to him, I was like, hey, can you tell me about this meditation thing? Because I kind of wanted to use it for this like performance tool. Like maybe it'll make me perform better at, whatever I'm trying to do. And so I started meditating every day, and then it changed my game as far as, so that's one habit, and what you can learn from that and learn about yourself has been fascinating. So that is something that, and it takes different forms too. In the very beginning, it's just trying to like understand that, to be aware of awareness and be aware of thoughts and be aware of like your breathing and be in that, all the way to eventually kind of being space. And it's kind of, in that, and there's probably, and by the way, I sit over here, by the way, I'm probably like, second grade at this point. So I can't wait to be graduated or get my PhD in this stuff. But that's one thing has had a huge impact on me over the past, almost decade.
Meditation is such the amount of people that I ask this question to, and one of the first things, if not the first thing they say, is meditation. If you're listening and you're wondering how to be a better version of yourself, I would argue to say that the easiest and also most challenging answer to that question is learn to sit in silence. It's changed my life as well. JP, this has been such an amazing convo, man. I feel like I could probably talk to you for hours and hours, if not days. I really appreciate you taking the time. I admire what you do and what you've done. I can't wait to hop into MeBio and see where I can be better mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I got to ask you the final question, man. Do you believe you were born with an inherent ability to get to where you're at today, or if you were made over time?
Yeah, I have to say it's made. I'm a product of my environment, and all of the things we talked about, all those signals coming in and how you deal with that, the learnings, and just reflecting on that. For sure, I was born into an environment, right? I'll give you one last story. Right after college, it was actually after we got married, we went to Europe, my wife and I, and we went to Ireland because my ancestors still live in Ireland, in a little town called Nina, middle of Ireland. And so we go out there and visit them. And at the time, you might recall the IRA were doing some bombings in Northern Ireland and stuff like that. And so it was a topic. And so I brought it up with my great aunt Marge, and I was like, how about these bombings like of innocent people in the bar? And she looked at me, she's like, what do you mean? We're all part of the IRA. And I was like shocked. I was like, sweet Aunt Marge is like supporting this. And it just reminded me, like, we are part of our environment. and we can choose to move out of that environment, but 100% we are made by all the things we literally put in our mouth, in our body, through our food, what we put in our head, through our thoughts, or who we talk to, literally how we set up our rooms and what art we have around us. I truly believe that, for me anyway, I've been made.
I'll take it, man. I love it when people say made. You're an amazing dude, and I can't wait to get to know you better and get connected with that artist, because that piece of art behind you is so awesome. Have a great day, man. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. There's a lot of value here, and I know that this one is going to crush. So keep doing what you're doing, my man. You're paving the way.
Appreciate you, my friend. Take care.
Thank you.